Before we get into this vlog, I just want to say a couple of things. So first of all, I do recommend watching this on the smaller screen, mainly because I feel like on a bigger screen the quality is just not as good. Maybe I'm wrong there, but yeah, I do recommend watching it on the smaller screen. I will play around with the camera settings to try and make this a bit better next time. But this is my first time using it. Second of all, I'm doing a voiceover on my gaming headset, so apologies if that's not as good as well, but like I say, it's my first time doing this. Second of all, there will be some historic segments in this vlog which will highlight some key facts about those events and show some footage that I recorded from that place. I do recommend, however, doing your own research, but to help with that I have left some useful YouTube links in the description by other creators, and this will be mentioned at the time during the vlog. Our first stop of the trip was in Thailand's capital of Bangkok. We spent the evening settling in at the hotel on the riverside here and then taking a walk down the famous Khao San Road. The next morning we got up to go visit this temple. This was just local to our hotel. I'll leave the name in the bottom left as I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. But this was our first kind of temple of the trip, so we didn't really know what to expect with like the dress code and the rules and stuff, so I didn't actually record too much of this. But I do record a bit more on the upcoming temples that we do visit. We then went to the outskirts of Bangkok, just a short taxi drive away to After the Rain Cafe. This is pretty chill, pretty scenic, get some good pictures, and you can also take out these boats for free. There's just a bit of a queue. After this, we headed straight to Bangkok, where we then went past the MBK Centre. This is quite a famous shopping centre known for selling its replicated goods for a fairly reasonable price. There's also a few other shopping centres around here that are a bit more expensive, but we'll come back to those later. Then after this, we just finished the night at the Player Box Game Centre. The next day we headed up to the King Power skyscraper. This has a mirrored floor that's over 1,000 feet up, hanging off the edge of the building. This is a really cool experience, I do recommend. You can get some cool photos, also sit up at the top and have a beer or whatever you fancy, though the prices can be a bit more inflated up here. After that we headed down and got our first tuk-tuk of the trip. Now these are a really cool way to explore the city and just anywhere in general, but they can inflate the prices of these a bit more, so I would highly recommend negotiating the price. Other ways to explore this would be using the Asian Uber equivalent, which is Grab. This can be a lot cheaper, but also it's not as cool as getting a tuk-tuk realistically, is it? So we then arrive in Lumpini Park, I believe that's how you say it, that's how you pronounce it. But anyway, it's known for its wildlife here. As you can see, there's these little commando dragons. I believe that I'm probably butchering that, they're probably not those at all, but let me know. They're pretty cool, they're pretty chill. I do recommend going to this park. There are some free pedlos you can take up, but we arrived a bit too late for that, so we end up coming back to that later in the vlog. So you'll see that then. The next day we got up early to go to the Grand Palace. Now in my opinion this is definitely a must do when you're in Bangkok because it is absolutely stunning. Though if you do come here I do highly suggest you try and go early in the morning when it opens, which is when we tried to go. And as you can see it's absolutely rammed with tourists, so I'd hate to think how busy it can get during the day at its peak hours. But this costs around £10, £11, £12 each to go. Like I said, definitely a must do, and it was a great way to end our first stay in Southeast Asia and our first stop in Bangkok. Straight after visiting the Grand Palace, we then took a 1-hour flight from Bangkok to our next stop, which was Chiang Mai. The following day, we then went to visit a elephant sanctuary. Now, when doing your research on these, please do make sure that these are ethical. A lot of places will try and get you to ride elephants. Often this is advised against that because this can obviously hurt the animals and is usually quite unethical. But we did do some research on this one and it seemed very ethical. We was in a little group, probably us two and another couple, and we got to feed the elephants as well as bathe them, which was a very, very cool experience. Like, I've never really got up close to elephants like that before, but they are so friendly and absolutely amazing. You can tell they definitely get looked after here. Following from the elephant sanctuary, we then went up to a temple in Chiang Mai, which I'll leave the name for in the bottom left corner because I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. This was definitely worth the trip, though it was a bit complicated for us because there was no buses running that day, and we also forgot to wear the appropriate clothing, but luckily they did have some outside the temple. Leading up to the temple as well, there are also a lot of steps. There's probably about 300 plus or steps or so. You can actually see in the video here. But if you do struggle walking up those, there is also, I think there's an elevator or like a cable car just further down. I'm not sure as we didn't use that. The following day, we didn't really do too much, to be fair. We just kind of walked around Chiang Mai Centre, looking in a few different shops and around a few different temples and that, as well as walking around the edge of the Chiang Mai wall that surrounds it here. This was quite nice because tomorrow we did have a long bus into Chiang Rai. Now in this bus we did actually pay a little bit extra for the VIP experience, which obviously means you get like bigger seats as well as a few snacks and that on the way, which is definitely worth it. It's always worth paying extra, slightly a bit more money for these better buses in Southeast Asia, as the other buses can often get quite cramped and quite uncomfortable, to be fair. But here we have our actual first hotel review. I'm actually getting good at vlogging here. I'm actually remembering to actually record stuff. So there's an improvement. Yep, sick bathroom and that. Well done, Dan. But yeah, after that awesome bathroom review, we did actually go out and explore a bit of Chiang Rai. There's a lot of dogs here, to be fair, and they don't like it when you get near their property, so they're quite protective. But yeah, we just kind of explored, saw this pretty cool golden roundabout and stuff before we headed up to the White Temple. Now this is probably the most famous attraction in Chiang Rai, but it's definitely worth going. I wouldn't say you need to spend any longer than like a night here, to be fair, because apart from this and the Gold Temple, which you'll see in a moment, like there's not really much else to do. But it is still quite a nice stop, nevertheless. They also have a pretty cool like fountains and photo opportunities, but you do just have to be a bit patient with that because there are a lot of tourists also trying to get their Instagram worthy photos as well. But oh, here's the Golden Temple. Actually, it looks impressive on camera, to be fair, but in person the white one was definitely way nicer. But after this, we didn't really do too much, to be fair. We just kind of went back into Chiang Rai and did a nice little walk along the river, which, well, apart from being bitten by loads of bugs and it being boiling hot, it was actually quite a nice little walk and a nice way to end the trip. Because the following day, we were actually getting a bus to our next destination, which was Chiang Kahong. But yeah, this bus was an absolute blast from the past. As you can see in the footage here, the actually only way to cool it down is by opening the windows or the little fans you have above your heads, or opening the doors. But yeah, I also had a little friend next to me, and in this box down here, a chicken, so he was making a lot of noise the whole way there. But it was worth it because our hotel had a pretty nice view, to be fair, once we arrived. We didn't stay here too long, up the next day to cross the border into Laos, where we'd be getting our 2-day, 1-night slow boat. These are the boats here that you stay on. We did pay extra for the more luxury experience. This basically guarantees you your own seat and table. They provide lunch, and they also provide hotel halfway through. I do highly recommend paying extra for this, as I mean you can YouTube it, but the cheaper ones are definitely not as just not as nice. Way more crowded. You know, not as much room to move around. And you know, you're on these boats for like 8-9 hours a day. It's definitely worth paying that extra to actually enjoy it. If you would like to actually book this more luxury 2-day slow boat experience, and it's called the Nagiv Mekong, I do recommend trying to book it in advance, as we actually only booked it about a week or two in advance, and we were one of the last people to actually secure a place on that boat. So yeah, I don't know how else we would have crossed Laos we probably would have had to end up getting a plane because I was not going on that cheaper experience, to be honest with you. But included with this, you actually do get a few excursions as well. So on the first day, we stopped at a little remote village, and then on the second day, we stopped at another little like remote marketplace where they try and sell you like alcohol, like clothes and stuff. And then you also end up going to these caves, which you can go to separately, but it's quite nice that they include that on the actual boat trip for you. Just one thing to note about though, the border crossing into Laos, which I didn't really mention it before, is that when you're doing this, you will need to use either some local currency or dollars. They do prefer dollars, but just make sure that these notes are absolute crisp, there's no markings or there's no creases on them, or they just simply won't accept them. It's about $35 per person, but most currency exchange places will actually only give you a $100 note. So just keep that in mind when you're actually doing it, and you will also need a printed passport picture of yourself as well for that application. It can get quite busy there, and it can get quite long in the queues. So what you can also do is you can actually do an e-visa online, which will actually speed up the process, but you'll still have to end up waiting for everyone else to get through to get before you get on the boat anyway. In the video here though, this is the village we stopped in called Pak Bang. We stayed in the standard hotel, but we did wish we upgraded to the more luxury hotel, if I'm being honest with you. It is pretty cold as well the next morning, so definitely bring a jacket. And we did also manage to see the elephant go for its morning drink, which was quite nice to see, to be fair. It does actually warm up quite quickly throughout the day, but you will find it's pretty cold up until about 10, 11-ish. One thing to note about this river as well is they're actually currently building a load of dams along the river. I'm not sure how this is going to affect the boat tours going forwards. I'm sure they'll figure out a way to get around these, like maybe you have to get off one boat and then get onto the next. But yeah, it's quite lucky that we went when we did before these dams are all complete. Having now arrived in Laos, more specifically Luang Prabang, we then set off straight away to go visit the UXO Laos Visitor Centre to learn about the unexploded ordnance within Laos. From 1964 to 1973, during the Vietnam War era, more than 2 million tonnes of ordnance was dropped by the US onto Laos, which is more than what was dropped on Europe during World War II. This is equal to one bombing every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day, for 9 years straight, making it the most heavily bombed country per capita in history. Most of these were cluster bombs, 30% of which failed to explode, and it's estimated that 80 million UXOs remain. Over 20,000 killed or injured since the war has ended, and current estimates suggest it could take decades to fully clear. Here we can see what these cluster bombs looks like. Now, a lot of these little balls were the ones that would actually fall out and explode, but a lot of these remain in the ground unexploded, so when the farmers and stuff are doing their work, they can often hit these and trigger the explosions. The North Vietnamese forces used Laos as a supply route to move troops, weapons and supplies into South Vietnam, and the US bombs Laos heavily to cut off these supply lines. We continue today by doing a bit of exploring. As you can see here, I went into some secret cave temple place, which was pretty cool. And then we finish off the day by going to a night market. These are always pretty cool, but sometimes the stores can seem to sell a lot of the same goods. The following day, we went to the waterfalls, which is definitely a must-do. They also have some bears here that you can see and look at. They're quite adorable. To be fair, there's quite loads of them. But the waterfalls themselves are absolutely stunning. I do advise getting here early though. We arrived just as the waterfalls opened, so there wasn't many crowds. But as the day goes on, it can get very, very busy and very touristy. So I do highly recommend going to that. If you do walk further up, you can take these steps. So there is a lot of steps. There's about 500 steps at the very top of the waterfall. But you do get some really cool views, and you can also go for a little swim in the waterfall baths as well. The following day, we headed down to Nam Dong Park. This is quite a nice chill place to go if you're looking for something a bit more out of the way, a bit more quiet. They have a few things here, like a few caves you can explore. They also have a few little waterfalls and a zip lining course. We did not do the zip lining course, though, mainly because we was just a bit strict on time. As you can see here in the caves, but I did not go any further than that. I was more than okay with just going in there. After this though, headed straight to the train station to go to our next destination. I would recommend using the train services in Laos, as they are a pretty good way to explore the country. But do book your tickets 3 days in advance, as these can often sell out very, very quickly. After arriving in Vang Vieng, we then got a bus straight to the hotel, where we woke up early the next morning to see the view from outside our hotel room, which we just did not see the night before because it was just pitch black. But yeah, and then we just went and explored around town. It was pretty warm here, to be fair. I'd say in Laos you often find it around like 28 to about early 30s. We went across this bridge here, which is like the main bridge from one side to the other. I mean, just look how shoddy it is. It's pretty dodgy, isn't it? Imagine that was like the Dartford crossing or something. Just be a bit mental, wouldn't it? But after getting to the other sides, you can actually take these little boats that go up and down that river here and that are in shot, which was pretty cool. You don't need to pre-book these boats or anything. You can see a lot of them just along like the riverbank here, just waiting. I can't remember how much we paid exactly, but I don't remember it costing much, so it's definitely worth it. The trip takes a lot longer than I thought actually. It goes upstream a little bit, but then most of the trip's actually downstream. In this shot here, look, you can see the river's actually not that deep up here. Look, it's literally just up to their ankles. So it's pretty hilarious that they even make you wear a life jacket. But, you know, I'm sure if some people would fall in, they'd probably still struggle. But going downstream is a lot better. You do get to see quite a lot more. You get to see some like wild buffaloes, I believe they are here. You get to see quite a lot of those in just Asia and Laos in general. They're pretty cool. You also get to just see some like amazing scenery. I'd say like Laos was definitely one of the more prettier countries that we went to. Actually really surprised me, this country, to be fair. I just did not expect it to be this cool. The following day though, we got up early to do a little multi-trip day tour. We started off with a bit of canoeing here, which we thought would just be a nice little stream down the lake. But there are quite a lot of points like this where we did see a few people fall off, but luckily we didn't. So that was a bit of fun. It actually took way longer than I thought. We then headed downstream to where the water tubing used to take part here. There used to be loads of bars, used to be quite vibing and buzzing. But due to the amount of deaths that resulted of this, the government had to step in and stop it, which is a huge shame. From the reports I read online, it was just a lot of people just getting too drunk and then going over on the water tubes and then just drowning and stuff. But yeah, I can see why they had to get in, step in and stop that. But after this, we just went and did a bit of caving. Not really too much to show here. I mean, it's just, walking through some. It's a lot better to do it in person than it is to show it on camera. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know what to say about this. But then we went and did a few water tubing, which was quite fun. I mean, look at his dickhead shining his light in the camera. Look, it's sharp, mate. And then we went on deeper into the cave. It got quite dark. Like, generally got to a few bits where if you did not have a torch, you just would not be able to see anything. It was pretty cold in here as well. The water was absolutely freezing. It was pretty cool, to be fair. This is quite a unique experience. I've never really done anything like this before. Usually you go in caves and it's just, laid out and already lit up. But this, you literally just had a head torch and no one to even show you where to go, which was quite cool. But after exploring the caves, for which felt like an eternity at the time, we then got some lunch, which they cooked fresh for us, which was actually pretty decent, to be fair. And then we moved on to the next part of the trip, which was zip lining. Now, this was actually an additional cost on the trip, which I wasn't aware of, so just be careful of that when you pre-book, that you actually know if you've already got this booked or if it's an additional cost. But either way, it's worth it. You get about 8 or 9 zip lines, and it starts off pretty easy, and then as you go along, the zip lines get a bit better and a bit further each time. So yeah, you get some pretty sick views, to be fair. But straight after the zip lining, we then got a bus to Blue Lagoon 3, I believe. I believe there's 3 of these Blue Lagoons in total around Laos, but this is the one we went to. It's got a little diving board. I think this is a video of me jumping in it, but it doesn't look that high from here. But believe it or not, when you're up there, it's absolutely terrifying. A lot of people didn't manage to do it. The following day, though, we headed to Namze Viewpoint, I believe it's called. I've probably butchered that. But this hike was actually a lot harder than a lot of people think. It's actually very short, only about 380 meters, but it is a full-on climb. Like, it really does take the energy out of you, so I would not do this unless you're quite fit. And I would also try and go early in the morning because it can get very, very hot. But it's definitely worth the climb. At the top, you do have like a few motorbikes and stuff which you can queue up for because it can get quite busy. Get a little picture and stuff for the gram if if you're all about that. But definitely worth it either way. You get some spectacular views, and definitely I've got some cool pictures up here that I'll definitely keep forever. Now, you can pre-book a taxi to get here on the app, but just note when you're actually here, the phone signal's really bad, so you might struggle to get a phone signal back. So definitely maybe see if there's anyone that would split a tuk-tuk on the way back for you, which would definitely cut the cost. After this, we headed straight to the train station again to go to our next destination. The train we actually got this time was quite a lot better than the other train we got. This is one of the more newer, quicker ones. Again, you have to book these about 3 days in advance when the tickets go on sale, otherwise you do not have a chance of getting these trains. But this took us to our next destination, which is Vientiane, I believe that's how you say it. This is actually the capital of Laos. This place was actually... There's not much to do here, to be fair. You could only really do with spending about a day here or day 2 tops. But we did a bit of exploring, little night market and stuff. The night market's quite big. Walked along the river. But the main reason we kind of went here was to actually get the plane to our next country, which we'll see in a bit. But yeah, it's quite a vibrant city. Obviously, totally different to the other 2 places we went to. You just don't need to spend too long here. But yeah, this was a great way to end the trip, to be fair, in Laos. We spent about a week here, but you could have easily spent a bit longer. I would have said maybe spend another day or 2 in Luang Prabang and Vientiane, or maybe headed down and explored a bit more further south. But yeah, like I say, we stopped in here because we actually needed to get the plane to our next destination. I would recommend booking this flight far in advance. We actually only booked it about a week or 2 in advance, and it ended up costing us quite a bit. The airline we actually ended up going with was Vietnam Airways. I was actually quite impressed with this airline. It kind of gave me British Airways vibes, but it was actually in line with our next destination, which was Hanoi, North Vietnam. We got here quite late, so then we ended up getting up early to do a bit of exploring. Now Hanoi is actually the capital of Vietnam, so this was quite a big city. The first stop we actually ended up going to was this Harry Potter cafe. If you're a big fan of Harry Potter, you'll definitely love this place. They have a lot of like themed food and drink, like butterbeer, as well as quite a nice themed restaurant with a load of like Harry Potter memorabilia. One way to describe Hanoi though would just be overstimulation. This place is just insane with the traffic, the bikes, the cars, the pedestrians. You really do have to concentrate and have your wits about you because they won't stop for you. You essentially have to walk out and make sure they kind of go around you. Like these clips here that I'm showing don't really do it justice. But yeah, this place is quite mental with a few bars and things like that. But we don't actually end up spending much time in Hanoi, but we do revisit it later in the vlog. But for now, we take a around 6 or 7 hour bus to the next destination, more specifically Hai Giang. I believe I've said that right, but this is more famously known for the motorbike loop that you can do up there. We actually ended up doing the 2-day, 1-night tour. The town itself is actually very quiet, but I think a lot of people mainly just come up here to stay the night before starting the bike ride the next day. The ride itself is definitely one of the best things I've ever done. Just note though, if you're doing the loop at the same time as us, which is around January, February, North Vietnam will be very, very cold. So if you are doing this, definitely bring a thick coat or jacket. You can buy these at the markets very cheaply, but our tour guide was actually very nice to actually just lend me one. Otherwise, I would have just been definitely just too cold to do this. Just one more thing as well, with the tour we booked, we actually did the Easy Rider package, which means you have a professional bike rider actually drive you around the whole route. I do recommend doing this, especially if you don't have any bike experience or you're just not confident on the bike, because unfortunately due to the roads and just how dangerous some of these mountains are, you do unfortunately get a few deaths and injuries per year. So just to avoid that, I'd definitely end up booking the Easy Rider package. Luckily enough, the group we were in for this tour was actually very, very small. So the first part of day one was actually only 2 of us. And then the rest of the trip, so the half of day one and then the rest of day 2 was actually with 2 other people. This was quite nice, as usually some groups can be really, really big. As you'll see in some of these clips, you'll see some big tours and operators, as well as some people that are just riding around it for fun. But overall, yeah, I'd highly recommend this. It's definitely a once in a lifetime experience, and you get some really, really cool videos and pictures. So at the end of today's drive, we ended up getting assigned our rooms for the night. We actually hadn't pre-booked a private room, but they were still able to provide this for us luckily, otherwise we would have been sharing a dorm with other people. We did still have to share a private bathroom though, but the nighttime activities include having a shared meal, as well as a bit of karaoke and a few bonfire and a pool table if you were ever able to get access to that. But Yeah, the karaoke went on until late in the night, but we actually ended up just calling it a bit early because we were just shattered from the riding, and we slept in our coats under the covers, and it was just absolutely freezing. The following morning though, we got up early, had some breakfast and set off for the day. This day was a lot warmer and clearer skies than yesterday, so definitely a much better day for riding. This was our final day of the trip, but definitely a lot more stops along this route as well compared to yesterday. It was just nice to enjoy the warmer weather. Heading back to where we started, definitely sad that the trip's ended, but also happy we did only do the 2-day one, as this was more than enough for us. Anything longer probably would have just felt a bit more tiresome, we probably wouldn't have enjoyed it as much. But we actually ended up spending the night in Hagyang at a nice little bungalow hotel before getting the 6 or 7 hour bus back to Hanoi the following day. This was a very, very early morning bus, I'd say probably around 7, 8 a.m. But we did pre-book this bus in advance as well as the seat selection. As you can see here, I was right at the front, which was quite nice. But the bus drivers in Vietnam are quite mad, so there's a lot of beeping and a lot of swerving going on about, so it's not exactly the smoothest of rides, but they get you back on time. We then headed straight to the famous Hanoi water puppet show. I would highly recommend looking at some YouTube videos on this, as I didn't actually get to record any because I didn't really want to disturb anyone else. But this was very cool, way above my expectations, and would definitely recommend going to see that if you're in Hanoi. In the evening, we actually went to go see the also world famous train street in Vietnam. I would recommend actually checking when the trains are due to go, as when we went, there was actually 2 trains. But the train really does come right up close. You do have to tuck your legs in, otherwise this will just sweep your feet. When you get there, you'll get a lot of people come up to you trying to get you in their caf. I would definitely recommend accepting this because they get you the best seats. This was actually the end of our second and final stint in Hanoi. The next morning we got up early to get a minibus to Ha Long. This is because we were doing the luxury 2-day, 1-night cruise around the bay. The weather wasn't the clearest, but you kind of have to expect that and take that gamble when you come to North Vietnam this time of year. But I definitely recommend doing it regardless. It's definitely one of the things I'll remember forever about this trip. The cruise we actually went with was Dora Cruises. I would highly recommend them as they were absolutely fantastic. But you'll see more clips of that later in the vlog. But for now, we got up the next day to take the mini boat, which actually takes us to the cruise. This actually took quite long, to be fair, but once aboard, we settled in, had a 5-course lunch, which was probably the best meal I had the entire trip. The boat got started and we started going around the bay. Day 1 included a few excursions like kayaking, as well as at the night time you did a bit of squid fishing. Our boat as well actually had a hot tub on the top deck, which was quite nice to use and just chill out and relax with. You also find a lot of little miniature boats kind of sailing past, trying to sell you food and snacks when you're on your balcony in your room. But along this trip, you do see a lot of other bigger boats. But the trip we went on, we kind of stayed away from them a little bit, which was quite nice. Little cabin tour here, so you've got the balcony, you've got a bed, you've got the TV. It was quite nice to sit out on the balcony, even though it was North Vietnam's usually a bit cold. It actually wasn't that bad. You've got a really nice like modern bathroom and shower, which was really cool. But after settling in, we did our first activity of the day, which was actually the kayaking. Um, Apparently there was a famous landmark here from the film King Kong. Maybe you'll see it in this video, I'm not sure. I've never really seen the movie, so I can't actually really point that out for you. But the water was actually incredibly warm, surprisingly, so I easily could have gone for a swim, even though I didn't do this, and you're probably advised not to do that, so don't do that. But yeah, the kayaking was pretty cool. Probably lasted for about an hour. Just went kind of around the loop of the little island here. That definitely tired us out. But after that, the captain then took us to the point where we'd be chilling for the rest of the night. It was quite quiet here, to be fair. He chose quite a nice spot. There was no boats really around us from where we were sitting in our room anyway. So that was quite nice. As you can see in this video clip here, there's a lot of other boats that do this trip. There's also a lot of boats that do day trips as well. So it was quite nice to kind of go before the bay gets too busy, because I can imagine it will get too busy at some point. But the cruise had a lovely buffet meal. I did prefer the lunch, to be fair, but the food at the dinner was definitely still good. And then we did a bit of squid fishing, but unfortunately, I did stay out here for about an hour, but unfortunately I just didn't get to catch anything. Got quite close though. The next morning though, we got up, had some breakfast before the next activity of the day, which was actually going to well, we were transported to a little water house here before we were getting rowed around the bay. This is actually free included in the trip, but it is advised you kind of tip the Vietnamese workers here, which we did do for this, which was quite nice to do. But yeah, you don't even have to do this activity if you don't want to. You can just chill on the cruise if you want, but I did want to do this just because, you know, I just kind of wanted to do all the excursions that were on offer. You do share the boat with quite a few other people, and there are quite a few people doing this at the same time. But it's quite relaxing, quite chill. Would recommend doing it if you do come on this trip. We then made our way back again onto the floating water house, where we then saw some of the fish that they're catching. The size of these fish on camera don't really do it justice, but in person, these things are absolutely massive. After this though, we got the boat back to our ship. We then packed our bags, cleaned up the cabin before disembarking on the cruise. We did a little bit of last minute exploring on the captain's deck and stuff here. But yeah, shortly after this, we headed straight back to the ferry port, where we then got a around 4 or 5 hour bus to our next stop, which was Ninh Binh. The shot and camera now is actually taken from the place we were staying at. Yeah, obviously do a lot of boat tours along up and down here that are quite popular, and it also goes down to the river to the main town. But we just did a little bit of exploring this evening. We didn't do too much as we were quite tired from all the travelling and the early morning start. But the next day we got up and went to the Lion Dragon Mountain. This is the base of it here. They have a few cafes, restaurants, a few photo opportunities. It's quite pretty down at the bottom, to be fair. But it's around 500 steps to the top. This is quite challenging, so you do need to be quite reasonably fit to do this. But I do recommend doing it, as the views are 100% worth it. This is the view from the top of the first point. As you can see, someone's got a drone up there, but it can get quite busy up here for photo opportunities, because some people can actually rent clothes at the bottom, so they'll go up wearing these heels and stuff somehow, and just take Instagram photos up there. But this is the viewpoint from the second bit. A lot better here. You can actually manage to get better photos and stuff up here. But if you continue going up to the third point, which is the Lion Dragon at the top there, this can get very dangerous. There's a lot of people climbing about, and as you can see, the first point down there, so it's very high up. So you are a bit kind of fighting for space and also trying to fight so you don't fall down the mountain. But after this, we headed straight back down and found some wild buffalo. We managed to get quite up close to these. I didn't realise you could get quite close to them. I thought they might have been a bit aggressive, but they're actually okay with us. They must just be used to the humans by now and coming right up to them. But yeah, I still wouldn't get too close. The following day, though, we did a bit of exploring. We came across this Buddhist temple called Bikdong Pagoda. Um, this place was pretty interesting. It seemed way bigger than I initially thought. The more you kept walking, the more you kind of explored. There was a few caves and that here that take you just further out. But you don't really need to spend too long here, to be fair. You can kind of explore it all within about an hour. After heading out the temple, though, we headed straight to our next destination. Along the way, we just saw a bit of the nature and then a few of like the farmers ploughing their fields and stuff. I mean, look at it, you could easily turn that place into like a mud run or something, couldn't you? But as soon as we got to our next stop at Buffalo Cave, we actually did a bit of duck feeding, which was quite cute, to be fair. But there's quite a few different things you can do here. So you can do a bit of fishing. You can also explore the cave here, like in this segment here. The cave is actually quite hard to get to, and not only that, a lot of the path is on these bamboo rails like this, so you have to be quite careful. Going into the actual cave itself is a bit of a climb as well. It's quite tight, so it kind of has to be a one in, one out kind of situation. But yeah, it's definitely worth to go in just to have a look and a bit of an explore. But after this though, there's also a buffalo as well that you can go feed, so they'll give you some free food and go feed the buffalo. Yeah, it's quite a nice little spot to be fair. It's quite cheap to enter and they give you a free drink, so definitely worth going. But in shot now is actually where we stayed in one of these wooden bungalows. This was overlooking the boat trips that were going past. I would recommend staying in one of these wooden bungalows. They are pretty cool, quite unique. They're not too expensive, but I would definitely book in advance, otherwise it can get quite expensive. We then just had a little look around town. This was definitely our favourite place to eat in Ninh Binh. This was called Chucky's Beer Garden. Now they do charge a premium for obviously their service and their setting, but they do also make their food fresh in themselves, and it is really nice. So I'd definitely recommend going there. But this is just a little nightlife kind of view of the town. There is a few like nightlife bars and like and things like that, but there's nothing that really kind of interested us. But then we headed uptown to see some of the main city and the lights. This was a bit more out of the way, so you had to get a taxi. But definitely worth a look up here. It was called Hyalu Old Town, I believe. But yeah, like some of the nightlife scenery here is pretty amazing. It's not that big. You don't really need to spend too long here. You easily just spend like a couple of hours looking around, maybe getting some food from the street markets. But you don't need to spend that long here. But this was actually the last stint of our trip here before actually taking us to our very first night bus of the journey, or sleeper bus, should I say. We opted to go with the more luxurious option, mainly because we'd seen some like horror stories online about how many people are on these buses and just sharing bed with people. We just didn't want that, so we just ended up paying a little bit more to have our own cabin. Now we actually managed to sleep fairly well on this bus journey. Just note on some of these buses there are no toilets, but they do make regular toilet stops every like 3-4 hours for you to get off and have a break. This was one of the stops the next morning we were just taking off from. Before arriving in Da Nang, this actually took us 12 hours to get to on the bus before dropping off our bags straight at the hotel and heading straight to our next destination, which was Barnard Hills, more famously known for the Golden Gate Bridge, which you've probably seen pictures of online before. The entry for this is quite expensive. I believe it costs us around 35-40 euros each for the entry. To get up to the actual top of the hill, you actually have to go up a few cable cars. There are loads of different options. It takes you to different parts of the park. But Barnard Hills actually holds the Guinness World Record currently for the longest non-stop single-track cable car, spanning over 19,000 feet. I believe this is the one we actually went on. It probably took about 15-20 minutes on this single cable car alone. But as you can see in the videos here, unfortunately, due to the time we kind of went to Vietnam and due to the park itself being really high up, we didn't really actually get to see much because it was quite a cloudy day. This is just kind of the risk you have to take. You know, we're here short on time, but we still decided to go up anyway. But in the pictures now, you can actually see the Golden Gate Bridge. It is very, very busy up there. So many people taking pictures and walking across the bridge itself. To be honest, I didn't really think it was that great. I would say it was okay, but I wouldn't say it's really worth just going up there for that. In the park itself, though, they do have a little like theme kind of set up here is like a little French town and stuff, which is pretty cool. And they also have a brewery as well that you can visit and claim some free beer. That was pretty cool. They have a little show downstairs as well. It can get quite loud, but it's definitely worth claiming the free beer. And they also have a little mini kind of like theme park inside as well, but nothing that really interested us, to be honest. After this though, it did start raining and we kind of seen everything, so we got the cable car back down. This was a slightly different cable car, not as long as the other one, but still took about 15-20 minutes. After this, we headed straight back to the town and explored the city of Da Nang, which is quite impressive to be fair. And here's a little room of our hotel here with a nice view onto the lake. We did end up only staying one night here. To be honest, you only really need to spend about one night here. If the weather's not that good, you're actually better off just heading straight over to our next destination which we go to, which is only probably about a 30-minute, 1 hour drive from Da Nang, which is Hoi An. Now we did much prefer Hoi An to Da Nang. I would have definitely stayed here probably about 3 or 4 days. I wouldn't stay there any longer than that. There's a lot more lively, there's a bit more going on, a bit more culture and stuff. Definitely more to do over here compared to Da Nang, I would say. There are some beaches as well if the weather's good that are just a short taxi drive away, and you can also still go to Barnard Hills if that's your thing. As soon as we arrived though, we just kind of went around the town, got something to eat. There's a lot of good food places here, to be fair. You'll always find something, but the most popular bit here is this river. Essentially, like in the evening and at night, you can pay for these boats to take you out, and you can essentially drop these like floating candles into the river for good luck. I mean, if littering into the river is your kind of thing for a TikTok video, you'll probably enjoy that. There are a lot of people that try and sell you these experiences as well, so definitely try and maybe negotiate down with them to get a cheaper price. But the following morning, we got up early to go to our first stop of the day, which was the famous UNESCO World Heritage Site called Mysore. This is essentially a complex of Hindu temples dating from the 4th to the 13th century. Unfortunately, as you can see in a lot of the videos here, a large proportion of the temples were destroyed during the US bombing raids during the Vietnam War, but many of these have been restored. One interesting thing about this temple actually is that the builders actually used a mysterious mortarless technique. The bricks are fused together without visible binding material, and modern science still isn't able to explain how this was done, which is pretty cool. But I definitely recommend visiting this site. It's only about 40 kilometers southwest of Hoi An, and we did a little day trip, so we did it in the afternoon. And then once you're done finishing exploring these sites, you can also get to go see a little dance show as well, which you can see in the videos here, which is pretty good. And then straight after this, we actually got the boat back to Hoi An. The bridge you can actually see in camera now is actually the Japanese covered bridge. On one side of the bridge is a monkey and the other side is a dog, symbolising the years in which the construction began. So it began in the year of the monkey and finished in the year of the dog. Next morning though, we got up, had some breakfast. I had one of these yogurt bowls, which you must definitely have when you're out in Asia, because these things are absolutely beautiful. But we got up and headed straight to our next activity, which was a coconut boat. This was a pretty cool experience. You get to get some pretty cool photos, which you have to unfortunately pay for. You pay for it halfway around, and you just kind of pick the ones you want. But the guy takes you out. You get to see a little bit of like fishing. He also kind of spins you round, which some people actually offer to pay for. So essentially, they'll swap over and they'll spin you round. But I kind of rejected this, and the guy just kind of done it for us anyway. I didn't really get to get a proper recording of it, but it was actually quite mad. It made me feel quite dizzy. After this though, just to relax and to end the trip in Hoi An, we went got a taxi to the nearest beach. It was quite nice to just sit here and chill, to be honest. The weather in North Vietnam can be a bit cold and stuff, so we kind of made most of the hot weather. After this though, we headed straight to our sleeper bus for the night. This was about a 12-hour sleeper bus from about central Vietnam in Hoi An all the way down to South Vietnam in Da Lat. I was not a fan of this sleeper bus, I must admit. I really didn't sleep that well and felt quite rough after it because of the roads and the bumpiness. But as soon as we arrived there, we arrived for our first activity, which was, as you can see on the videos here, the Alpine Coaster. This is definitely a must do. I would definitely recommend doing this. It's a pretty fun experience. Though we did get here early, and I would recommend doing that because then you kind of get to go before the crowds go on, because you might get some like slow coaches on there that's kind of hold you up. But I managed to just zoom down it, which was pretty fun. It's actually recognised as being the longest alpine coaster in Asia, which is pretty cool. And then halfway down here, you get to see a few waterfalls, do a bit of exploring, and then it kind of just takes you back up to the top again. And again, they do take some photos of you as well, so you can purchase these at the bottom, and you'll have to take them back up with you. But once we've done this, we just kind of went back. Well, I mean, there's a situation, the bathroom situation in the room, which was kind of wild, that there's just a glass there between the bed and the toilet, but you know, make do, make do. But no, there was luckily a curtain you could pull across there, otherwise I probably wouldn't have used the toilet the entire stop. But the hotel had these fish which was pretty massive, they were pretty cool. After like staring at those for a little bit, being fascinated by them, we just headed out to town. There's quite a nice big market here as well in Dalat, which is definitely worth a little walk around. Not really too much took my fancy, but it can get very, very busy here, as you can see in the video. But yeah, I would say you only really need to spend a day here. You can see everything. I mean, in the background, you've got the Eiffel Tower of Dalat there, which is pretty cool. That's pretty neat to see. Can't believe they got that. But the next day we got I'd say it was probably about a 6 or 7 hour minibus ride into our next stop of the trip, which will actually be our last stop of Vietnam. We actually opted to pay for one of these minibuses, which was definitely worth it for the long rides. But our next stop was actually Ho Chi Minh City, as you can see here. As soon as you get off the bus, it's just basically overstimulation. The city is absolutely manic. We actually ended up going down one of the busiest strips here. And there we are, kind of walking down with our backpacks, tired after a long day of journey, and you just got people constantly trying to get you into their bars. And no, believe it or not, mate, I've got my 40-litre backpack on. I'm tired as anything. I'm clearly not dressed for it. No, I do not want to go ahead and enjoy one of your bars. Anyway, ran over, but to be honest, we didn't really do too much here. We just kind of dropped off the bags, went and tried some local cuisine, and just got an early night's rest really for the next day, because we were heading to the War Remnants Museum. It was really, really hot this day, but it was definitely good and important to go and learn about some history regarding the Vietnam War. Now, the Vietnam War was between 1955 and 1975 between the North Vietnamese Communists and the South Vietnamese Anti-Communists. The US involvement only peaked around 1965 to 1973, under the belief that if Vietnam fell to communism, other Southeast countries would follow suit. Booby traps and underground tunnels were used to outmaneuver more heavily armed US forces, to which they responded using chemical warfare such as Agent Orange, which was later linked to more serious health issues and birth defects. The US left after mounting costs, political pressure, public opinion, and no clear path to victory. On screen now you'll see a lot of planes, helicopters, kind of tanks that were just left by the US Army and have now remain at this museum. You also get to see a lot of the torture methods that were used. There's a lot of example of the prisons, what the soldiers would face. You can see in this shot here is the machine gun on the side of the chopper. After this we actually move more inside into this little bunker here where you can actually see, I believe it's called a guillotine, which is an apparatus designed for effectively carrying out executions by beheading. And in the next shot you'll see these tiger cages that were used to put the Vietnamese soldiers into so they couldn't stand or anything like that. And in this video here as well you can see an example of a prison. That was quite freaky to see the little figure just standing there. Inside the actual museum itself there was unfortunately a lot of graphical images of deceased, women, men and children, and the effects of the Agent Orange gas, which you can go and do some research on yourself. I'm not obviously going to show any of that on this video here. After this we went and had a look at the Independence Palace, which you can see here. This is more of just a historical landmark, and I believe was the home and workplace of the President of the Republic of Vietnam. Correct me if I'm wrong. After this we went to go see the Notre Dame, which clearly looks beautiful under all of its scaffolding. And then we headed into the a bit of a famous post office that I just quickly looked at and seen online. And in here a lot of people actually send postcards from back to family at home, which is what I did. I ended up sending a little postcard back to my family in the UK. After this, we did a little bit of walking around in one of these markets. These markets are absolutely huge, stalls absolutely everywhere. And this is me just trying to be a bit of a food vlogger. The following day, we actually had a full day tour booked to go see the Coochie tunnels. On the way, we actually stopped at one of these little like places where they kind of, well, it's mainly for people that have been affected by Agent Orange, and you can buy these pieces of art they make on these plaques. I can't remember the exact name for them, but they are very, very stunning, and it's for a very, very good cause. So if you want to purchase one of those to help out there, you can. But as soon as we arrived at the Coochie tunnels, we were shown around a lot of the traps. These tunnels and this forest in particular can be very busy, and you also get to experience actually going into some of these tunnels yourself. And this is me actually going into one of these tunnels that the soldiers would use to poke out from to gun down a load of American soldiers. It was very, very dark down here. Literally couldn't see anything. It was very, very warm as well. If you're any bigger than me, then you'd struggle to get in and out of these. Which is one way the Vietnamese actually had an advantage over the Americans. They would have a lot of these exposed kind of tunnels here that a lot of the Americans would struggle to actually go into. A lot of them would actually attempt to go into, but the Vietnamese would set loads of traps, things like that, which really put off the Americans from going down there. So a lot of the time these tunnels were just left exposed because they knew the Americans wouldn't really want to go down there. This is actually a tank that's just been left there since the war. But a lot of these traps you can actually see in this video here that they kind of show how they work. A lot of these weren't exactly to kill the soldiers, it was more to instill a kind of a fear into them, to really like put them off. Just to give you an idea on how big this network of tunnels are, it is estimated that these stretch up to 250 kilometers or over 150 miles long, with some of these tunnels actually going all the way over to Cambodia. There were generally about 3 levels to this, with the deepest of tunnels reaching up to about 10 meters or about 33 feet underground. In the video coming up, you'll see a part of the structure. This is just an example. This would have been underground, but this would have included living quarters like kitchens, hospitals, weapons storage and command centres. Cooking was often done early in the morning to mask smoke with often fog, as soldiers would often stay underground for days or even weeks at a time. In addition to the tour, you could also pay to do some rifle shooting, which we did do. This costs around $2 per bullet. This was definitely pretty cool. We managed to shoot the AK-47, which can jam up a lot, but apparently that's just quite normal for the gun. On our way to actually go down the tunnels ourselves, we actually managed to see a B-52 bomb crater. Now, actually going down into the tunnels ourselves now, please note that obviously a lot of these tunnels were actually made wider for tourists. So if you can just imagine, like, even now, you'd have to be crouching, crawling through these tunnels, and how tight it would have been even back then. But every, like, 20 meters, you had the option to continue going or exit the tunnel. I did actually manage to go all the way with one other guy, and a Vietnamese soldier actually takes you all the way through to make sure that you're safe. So in total, the length was about 100 meters, but the last 40 meters were a lot more thin and a lot more narrow, and I wasn't even able to record this at all. But yeah, it just really just goes to show how tight these tunnels would have been. After getting back from a day at the tunnels, we just kind of walked around and explored. I saw this little like big complex area that had loads of individual cafes and that, which I thought was pretty cool. But we just walked around the city as it was actually our last day in Vietnam. We had to be up early in the next morning because we were actually taking around a 5-hour journey, I believe it was, in this minibus to our next country of the trip. After successfully crossing the border with paying for our visas, which we had to do again in American dollars, we actually took a little break halfway. This was our minibus for the journey. Again, it was one of these more expensive minibuses, which is definitely worth it. But having arrived in our next country, which is actually Cambodia, more specifically Phnom Penh, which is actually the capital of Cambodia. As soon as we arrived on the minibus, we had about, maybe I'd say probably about 10 people waiting outside the bus that we thought were our passengers for the next journey. Turns out these were actually people that were trying to give us, a ride to our hotel, like tuk-tuk drivers, which can be very overwhelming, especially when you've just arrived in a new country. So you do have to be a little bit stubborn and have a bit of a backbone to just kind of fend them off essentially. That is quite a common thing with Cambodia. You do get a lot of tuk-tuk drivers, especially trying to, make some money and stuff, which is completely fair enough, but it can just get a little bit tiresome. But the next morning we went to our first stop of Cambodia, which was actually the Genocide Museum. This is something that has happened more, I would say, more recently, and is definitely something everyone should be aware of. The Cambodian genocide happened between 1975 to 1979. The Khmer Rouge, a communist regime led by Pol Pot, estimated to have killed 1.7 to 2 million people, which was around 25% of Cambodia at the time. Methods included execution, forced labour, starvation and torture. Children were both victims and executioners, indoctrinated from a young age. The regime ended in 1979 after Vietnamese forces invaded Cambodia. Now, due to the rules regarding recording in certain places in this centre, I just wasn't able to get this footage, nor did I feel comfortable getting it. But I will leave a link to a YouTuber in the description who goes into this in more detail and shows a bit more of it, who I definitely recommend checking out. Now, we did actually also try and go visit the killing fields after this, but unfortunately, due to the dress code of we just simply weren't able to enter this. Just note that when you do come here, that the dress code for the killing fields is a lot more strict than the actual genocide centre. But either way, this is a very dark part of history of Cambodia that deserves to be known about and recognised to prevent things like this from happening again. So I would go and definitely do some more research about this topic. So yeah, as I mentioned before, there is a link to a YouTube video where it goes more in depth about the genocide centre as well as the killing fields, so please do go and check that out. For the rest of the evening though, we just kind of took a stroll up and down the centre to explore, went and saw a market and then went up and down the river. We actually weren't staying too long here, as the next day we were actually going to take a bus and then a boat ride to our next stop in Cambodia. Now, this was actually going to take us to the tropical island of Koh Rong. This is definitely a must-do if you come into Cambodia. Koh Rong is, as you'll see in the footage shortly, is an absolutely stunning island. That also actually has some nightlife to it as well, so if you're a bit more into that kind of vibe on your trips, then you can do that as well. But if anyone said to me before I came on this trip that I should go visit this island in Cambodia, this tropical island, I'd honestly look at them and think they're a bit bonkers. But genuinely, if you do come on this journey around Southeast Asia, this place is definitely a little bit of a gem. So as you saw in some of those clips there, when it rains it pours on these kinds of islands, which it did. But it generally didn't rain from, I'd say, more than 30-40 minutes at a time, even if it did. But yeah, one thing to also note, you probably saw in the clip there on the tuk-tuk, is the really bumpy roads. Now this place is still kind of really developing, so I didn't really see any actual proper roads. But I'm sure there probably are a few more deeper into the island somewhere, but this place still remains quite raw and quite authentic. But heading back now on the speedboat, as we didn't really get to spend too long on this island due to time constraints and future weather coming up, so we headed back to our next stop. Well, we're actually going to get the sleeper bus to our next stop. This was actually an 8-hour bus ride to our next destination. We were actually going to get there around 5 o'clock in the morning because of this. But yeah, definitely not our best sleeper bus, but definitely wasn't a bad sleeper bus in any case. I did actually manage to get some sleep on this compared to the last one. This would actually be the last sleeper bus of our trip. But as soon as we arrived in our next destination, which was Siem Reap, we thought we would go drop our bags off at the Airbnb and go straight out and try and catch the sunrise at Angkor Wat, which, as you can see in this next clip here, we managed to do very luckily. This was absolutely stunning, and I would say it's definitely worth the effort of anyone trying to do this when you're in Siem Reap. Now, the tickets to Angkor Wat were actually quite expensive. I'd say it was around $30, I'd say. But you don't just get to see one temple, there's actually you get to see about, I'd say 6 or 7 of them, but they're quite spread out. So you would probably need to order a grab or try and flag down a tuk-tuk whenever you can to go to each one. And it was very busy at this time in the morning. Obviously everyone was there to see the sunrise, so everyone's kind of exploring it at the same time. But once you've seen the main one and you go and explore the others, it can get a bit more quieter. Now, if you are here for multiple days and you don't think you'll have time to explore it all, you can also buy multi-day tickets. We only bought a 1-day pass, so we kind of just wanted to see Angkor Wat and a few of the others, which we did manage to do. So we saw about probably 3 or 4 on a day. You'll see in the upcoming clips here of the other temples, but I would say for us personally, this was more than enough. Now, Angkor Wat was actually built in the early 12th century. It is known to be the 8th wonder of the world, and the size of it actually covers about 162 hectares, which is about 400 acres, and this is the largest religious monument in the world. Now, after this, we managed to get a Grab, which is the Southeast Asian kind of taxi service. We managed to get a tuk-tuk to our next temple, which was actually called Tar Prom Temple, I believe that's how you say it. But some of you may recognise this. This is more famously known as it was actually used as a backdrop for the filming of the Lara Croft movie Tomb Raider, which is pretty cool. I've never really seen the movies myself. But yeah, this was actually a really cool temple, to be fair. You can get some really cool pictures in that here. It really is like very picturesque. Now after this we actually started heading to our next temple, which was actually called Bayon Temple, I believe. This place is more known for having its local wildlife and visitors, such as the monkeys here. I wouldn't get too close to these. You got a lot of people posing with these here, but there have been reports of them, you know, well, not exactly attacking, but let's say mistaking humans for giving them some kind of food and things like that. So they can get a little bit aggressive around that. So I wouldn't get too close with them. But yeah, the kind of the 3 temples we went to, so the Angkor Wat, the Bayon, and as well as that Tar Prom one from the Tomb Raider, I would say this is a pretty good mix to go to. I'd definitely recommend those 3 at least when you go and visit here. We did also walk around this temple and we saw a few more monkeys and stuff playing around, which were quite cute. One of them actually ended up grabbing and latching onto my legs because I had a water bottle on me, but luckily one of the local photographers kind of shushed it away. But yeah, it's just lucky they were there taking pictures at the time, otherwise I wouldn't have known what I would have done. I kind of just froze. I didn't really want him to come across aggressive so he gets aggressive, do you know what I mean? So after that, we just kind of went back and checked into our Airbnb. It was actually a really big Airbnb, to be fair. There was only 2 of us, but it ended up giving us an Airbnb for like 6 people, so that was kind of a good result. We actually found, especially in Vietnam and Cambodia in particular, that Airbnbs were a little bit better for the price and what you could kind of get for your money. So when in those countries, I'd definitely be looking on the Airbnb app. After catching up on some sleep, we actually headed down the famous pub street. This is known for its kind of restaurants and its bars and its nightlife. You can actually get beer really cheaply down here. You can definitely pay less than £1. Some places I was even paying like 40 pence for a local beer, so that's pretty nice tasting beer as well. Next morning we had a few guests join us for breakfast, and then we kind of just headed out and around town to explore. I definitely preferred the vibe and of Siem Reap compared to Phnom Penh. It definitely felt just a lot more nicer and just less chaotic and just a little bit like more upmarket. But we actually headed down to the Angkor Botanical Garden. Now this is actually free to visit, and I definitely would recommend going to this place as they have some stunning kind of garden views as well as some wildlife as well, which is pretty cool. So I'd definitely head down here. Just one thing to note, as you're not actually allowed to take in any drinks or like bottled water, things like that. You have to kind of leave it outside with the security, which I found quite strange to be honest, but you've got to respect their rules behind that. But there's a few different things you can do here. They have a cafe and stuff so you can get food and drink inside. You can also feed the fish, and the fish go pretty crazy when you feed them. There's quite a lot of them in there. They also have quite a lot of other different wildlife as well at the park. They have these like peacocks, I believe they're called. Yeah, they're definitely called peacocks. But they also had this monkey here. He was quite cute. And there's the peacocks just doing their thing. They also had some emus here. Now these were actually very, very cool. I definitely enjoyed the emus, but I didn't want to get too close to them. But after this, we headed back to town and got some food. I actually tried a Cambodian dish here called lok lak. That's very nice. I definitely would recommend that. And we headed back out to the pub street again. This place is always pretty lively. This is kind of where you'll see everyone hang out in the evenings. And then on the way back, they also had this market, which some of the artwork here was just stunning. You could see the people like actually making it and doing it there and then. But the next day we actually left Siem Reap and Cambodia. This was actually our longest travel day yet. So it involved getting around a 8-hour bus to Bangkok. Soon as we arrived in Bangkok, where we originally started, if you remember, we went back to the airport to get a plane. Which took around an hour, hour and a half to our next destination, which was in Thailand, more specifically South Thailand, Phuket. Now we actually stayed in Karon, which was a very nice place. Again, we had an Airbnb. The only issue of this Airbnb was on a massive hill. Now the vlog kind of changes from here. It goes from more like travel vibes to more kind of like holiday vibes. That's kind of what South Thailand is really. It is more of a kind of holiday place. But as you can see here, they got these tsunami hazard zone warnings because those of you that know, there was a really bad tsunami here that happened back in 2004 and killed a lot of people. So there's just warning zones about that now and where to go in case of that. But just chilling around the beach was quite nice. We haven't really had a chance to really slow down and do that this entire trip. The beach here in Karom specifically was absolutely beautiful. I'd definitely recommend coming here if you ever come into Phuket. And the sunsets as well, as you'll see in a couple of these pictures and videos here, like just absolutely unreal. But yeah, we'll be staying here for a couple of days before we move on to our next place in South Thailand. But that night we actually went to Patong Beach. Now this is about half-hour away from Karon itself, so we got a taxi. And now this is kind of where you'll find all like the nightlife, the bars, the buzziness and things like that. I actually found it really expensive here. I thought it would be quite cheap, but we went in one of the big clubs here. I believe it was called Illusion. I think this is one of the biggest clubs in Southeast Asia, or like one of the top clubs in the world apparently. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was anything amazing. It's definitely worth a visit though. But yeah, just a shame about some of the prices of the drinks and that. They really do try and scam you if you don't understand the currency. So yeah, my top tip would definitely be to understand the currency and how much things cost. Apart from that, you should be alright. A lot of the drinks aren't too bad. Like, you can look in most bars and get a beer for like 2-3 quid. But the following day, again, we just didn't really do much. We kind of chilled around the beach. Watch the sunset again. I managed to actually get a little time lapse of it here this time, which is pretty cool. The beach always got really, really busy around this time. Everyone kind of wants to get that Instagram picture of it, don't they? But the video here actually shows the hill that we had to climb up most times because we didn't have a moped or anything to go up this hill. The camera doesn't really do it justice, but I guarantee you coming up this hill in about 35-degree heat was not the one. But we ended up going to a little viewpoint here, which was pretty cool. You get some pretty cool pictures up there. You got to see there was people taking pictures of this eagle here. Maybe in shot, you might be able to see the big Buddha on the hill. In this shot, you can maybe right on the top there. But after this, we ended up getting a little bus here. This was costing about us maybe like £1 each or something. Ended up taking us into the Phuket Old Town. They do a little market here every Sunday, so that's pretty cool to go and see. You can, hassle down and bag yourself some clothes and things like that. It was also cool to just go around and see some of the architecture of like the old town and things like that. It was quite a pretty town. You don't really need to spend too long here though. We spent probably the afternoon and then got the bus straight back. You don't really need to spend it any longer than that. Again, when we got back, a really nice sunset. Never really gets old, does it? Coming up now though, we've got a little treat. We've got the best 7-Eleven snack bars. We've got this chocolate cake which they'll actually microwave for you and tastes absolutely amazing. We've got these little chocolate milks that you just can't miss. We've got this dried mango which tastes amazing. Definitely recommend that. You've got these C vitamin drinks which taste pretty good if you're feeling a little bit rough, and these little Schweppes lemonades here. We've got the chocolate corn snacks of course, and the very famous ham and cheese toasties. Yeah, didn't ask mate, but anyway, back to the vlog. Anyway, it was actually our last day in Karon here, which we're actually quite sad about because we did really enjoy it here. But we did have to pack up and head on to our next destination in South Thailand. So to do this, we had to get a short bus journey to a ferry terminal. And then we had to get a short kind of speedboat-ish boat. Yeah, it didn't take too long. It took about an hour to get to our next stop. We got some pretty cool views along the way. South Thailand does have a lot of natural beauty as well. You do get to see a lot more of it in the next destination that we're going to and heading to as well. This is more specifically known as Ao Nang, but a lot of people know it as Krabi. Though I must say I did enjoy Krabi. Like I say, I had a lot more like natural kind of beauty and stuff, but I did massively prefer the beach at Karon compared to here. Main reason being is because in Krabi you get a lot of boats, as you'll see in the clip up here. You get a lot of the boats come in and out constantly at Krabi, which kind of just ruins the relaxation part of it as well. It can also be very, very busy along this beach. But you can take paths that go to the next beach along, which a lot of people do here. It kind of goes through the forests. But one thing of this forest, and we did see it happening at the time, is that a lot of people were actually having issues with the monkeys there. A lot of the monkeys, like I say, can sometimes get a bit aggressive when they think you have food or water for them. And they can essentially try and grab that, and they don't really like it when you get a bit too close to them. So a couple of people had a few issues with that, which was quite entertaining to see. But again, the sunset never changes. The sunsets are absolutely stunning. They also had this fire show as well, which they put on for free for people to see. They was obviously just accepting donations and stuff. But that was really cool to see. But Ao Nang is actually quite big. You can actually spend quite a lot of time exploring it. They got food markets. They got a lot of bars and restaurants that go all the way up and down the main street and along the seafront. So you can spend quite long exploring all of this. But the next morning we got up early again, had another one of our fruit smoothie bowls, which are always delicious. And we got a boat onto the next beach, which I believe is Railway Beach. More specifically, Railway Beach West, I believe. You can get transport over here pretty cheaply, but I'd definitely try and get here early and try and secure yourself a spot though, as there's not actually much shade around this beach at all, but this is definitely one of the better beaches I'd go to when you're staying in Krabi. It was also a very, very hot day as well, so it's very easy to burn and cook if you've not got any shade, so just be wary of that. But the next day we were actually going on a boat tour, as an island hopping tour. We pre-booked this about day in advance, day or two in advance. But the first island this took us to was actually Chicken Island. This was really quite a beautiful island to be fair, but the time we got in there we were quite lucky because the sea can actually block you from walking from one side of the island to the other. But luckily when we got there the tide was still quite out, but it does come in very fast, so just know that when you're actually going onto this island. But I actually cut my leg on the boat doing this, so I didn't really fancy getting in the sea too much, especially when they did a bit of snorkeling, because I just didn't really want to infect my leg, or just, you know, the salt water on the wound would have really hurt. But on the next island, we ended up having some lunch. I believe this was Kopoda Beach. This is definitely probably the nicest island that we went to. It was just very picturesque and very scenic. Get some really cool pictures. But after exploring this, we actually headed to Railway Beach East. So this was completely the other side we went to the day before. They have a few caves here, a little bit of wildlife. And they also actually have some cliffs and stuff you can go up and climb, but we just didn't have enough time for that, so I couldn't do that. But it can get very, very busy round here. As you can see, it's just full of tourists for a reason. I mean, it is pretty stunning, to be fair, but it's not exactly the kind of place you come to relax. You kind of just go, have a look, and then dip, really. But yeah, as you can tell in a lot of these kind of videos, you can just tell that the surrounding beauty of like Ao Nang Krabi is just stunning. That's why you get a lot of tourists here. But unfortunately, this was the last stint of our time in Krabi before having to get a bus to go to the ferry terminal, where we'd actually be getting on our last stint of our trip. We're actually on the lower deck of the bus here, so there was only literally a couple of us on it, but the bus was actually huge. We just got lucky of getting some downstairs seats. But the bus and ferry itself didn't take too long. I'd say it probably took about 3-4 hours in total from one end to the next. The destination we're actually heading to now is actually the island of Koh Samui. I believe I've said that right, correct me if I'm wrong. But this is somewhere I really wanted to come to before heading home. I've heard quite a good few things about it, so I really did want to explore down there. But more specifically, when we actually arrived, we were in Lamai. This is again very touristy, kind of very holiday vibe. We booked our hotels very late in advance, and the hotels are way more expensive in this part of the island compared to the other parts we went to in Southeast Asia. But the food was still relatively cheap. Like, you got this grilled salmon and veg and rice here, and this probably cost me about 8 or 9 quid, which, you know, back home it'd cost you easily more than double. And, you know, things like haircuts and all that, so I was getting a haircut for probably like 7 or 8 quid compared to at home that cost me, like, again, more than double. But our first stop on this island was actually to the Overlap Stone, more specifically Overlap Stone 2. This is a very, very steep climb up to a very cool viewpoint, which you can get some cool pictures at the top of. But just be careful when you're coming up here, because you do get a lot of motorbikes come up here, and we did actually see someone fall, unfortunately. So I would only advise coming up here if you're quite comfortable on the bike. Otherwise, you could do what we do. We got a taxi part way up, and then we just walk the rest. But yeah, as you'll see in a lot of these videos, there's a lot of pretty cool photo opportunities with some cool backdrops here. You do have to pay. It's not much though, it really isn't much at all. It just essentially helps the people maintain it up here and things like that. So it's definitely worth coming up here and just paying a small amount and getting some pretty cool photos. But anyway, after this we actually slowly made our way back down. Obviously going back down is always a little bit easier than going up, but in this heat it was still pretty tough either way. We were completely drenched in sweat. And we made our way onto the beach, just to kind of chillax a little bit, but that didn't last too long because I saw that there was this free gym that you could use. It's actually on an island, which is pretty cool, and I hadn't been to the gym once whilst I was out here, so I thought I'd go and make most of it and use this free gym. Probably the best gym I've ever been on in terms of location. Like I say, it is free, but I'd definitely make a donation at least just to help them keep running it. But the next day we actually headed up north of the island to this Capybara Cafe, which you have to book in advance, but it is pretty cool. The capybaras, they're pretty chill. They also have a few ducks and meerkats as well. They're actually way bigger than I thought in person. I guess they are a huge rodent, but I didn't expect them to be that big. But yeah, they're pretty chill. You get a free drink and stuff when you do that, but it is quite expensive, I think, for what it is. And we're obviously near the Samui airport, as you can see, a lot of planes flying over close overhead here. And then we went and played a bit of foot golf, which was actually quite a lot of fun. To be fair, it was very, very warm, but halfway they do have a few drinks and stuff and give you like a few cold towels and that. But yeah, it's definitely very fun. I definitely recommend playing a bit of foot golf if you've never done it. All of the holes as well are themed based on like football players as well, so if you know your kind of football, you'd probably recognise a lot of these references and stuff as you go along the course. But later that evening, we actually just headed back to the hotel and chilled out before actually going up north of the island again. This time we were actually heading out on a night out. So our first stop was actually at Ark Bar Beach Club and Resort. Now this place was actually really, really good. I'd highly recommend it. It had a really nice vibe to it. Didn't seem much trouble. You had like obviously a swimming pool, pool tables. You had a little a DJ going on with some light shows. The drinks weren't too bad as well. You kind of expect this to cost a little bit more, but it wasn't too bad. I'd say like a bottle of beer was probably costing you around £3. But we actually wanted to explore a bit more of the nightlife up in Koh Samui, so we actually moved on to a club called the Sound Club. This place was okay. I definitely preferred the Ark Bar Beach Club though, so I would have stayed there. The next morning we got some food, didn't really do much at all that day, the weather was a bit crap, which explains the lack of footage, but the following day we were actually heading back anyway, so we ended up getting back on the ferry and back on the coach back to the Krabi airport, as we were actually going to be heading back to our last and final stop of the trip, unfortunately. But it was also where we exactly started, if you remember, which is the capital city of Thailand, which was Bangkok. We ended up travelling quite late and getting back quite late because we kind of wanted to make the most of the day, or our last day in Koh Samui. So we ended up taking our AirAsia jet plane back, which we actually used AirAsia quite a few times during this trip. I would say they're kind of the equivalent of like an EasyJet in Europe. They're pretty cheap, pretty, does a job. And we didn't ever get any troubles or delays or anything, so that's a big plus. But it was nice to be back in Bangkok. We definitely did enjoy this city and continue to do so. Luckily we were in the city before all the chaos kicked off with the earthquakes that happened at the end of March. Luckily we just missed that. But we also use this as an opportunity to catch up on things that we didn't get to do last time. For example, one of them was using those free pedlos here. As you can see here, it's the duck pedlos. These are pretty cool. It was also very hot in Bangkok. It was around like 35, 36 degrees at this time, and it was very humid as well. So the city can get very, very warm, especially with all the cars and all the pollution added on top of that as well. But we actually ended up getting a tuk-tuk back to the MBK Centre, which, if you remember at the start of the vlog, is a massive supermarket known for selling its replicas. Last time I recorded this, it was night time and there was loads of lights and stuff, so I don't know if you remember that. That was pretty cool. Definitely a lot different to see it in the daytime. And then we just walked around and explored some of the area, some of the other supermarkets and stuff, the more upmarket ones, like this one here, before getting the hotel, which was located right next to the airport, back for the night. We then got up very early in the hours of the morning. I think this was probably around 4 AM to get a quick taxi to the airport itself, where we'd catch the flight for our first stint of our journey, which would actually take us to Doha in Qatar. This journey would be split in 2 7-hour journeys with a little short 2-hour layover in the middle, so making it around 16 hours in total. Landing in Qatar, that was actually the first stint of our journey done. We then had to walk straight to the gate for the second stint of our journey, which would take us about 7 hours back into London. I actually saw a pretty cool A380 there, but that wasn't on the plane we was getting on. We was actually on a 787 for the entire leg of that journey. Taking off from Qatar here, you can actually see in the corner there, that's one of the stadium views that were used in the World Cup recently. Under those clouds will be Great Britain, England. We'll be landing into Heathrow to fully complete the end of our trip. It was very, very cold in England when we landed, but yeah, it was quite nice to reflect on the trip and stuff while she was up there in the plane. Definitely one of the best things I'd ever done, and yeah, something I'll remember forever. Just some quickfire questions to end the video now. So would I recommend backpacking Southeast Asia? Absolutely, 100%. It's definitely a once in a lifetime experience to do. You get to see some pretty cool, amazing experiences and cultures. So yes, definitely. How long should you go for? So we went for 2 months, but with the route we took, I personally wouldn't go any longer than 3 months. If you went 3 months, you'd be able to do it at a slower pace and spend a more relaxed kind of vibe along the journey, but I wouldn't go longer than that. Spending money, so we came in at around £55 per day. This included transport, hotels, activities and food. You could come in under this if you wanted to, but you could also actually go a bit over this as well. It just depends on how you are. Just want to say a massive thank you for watching. If you have made it this far, please leave a like if you haven't already, and any constructive criticism is massively appreciated. Thank you.